Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Take Your Points. I'm your host Ronan Scott. This week we're talking about the Ulster final and Tyrone's 1-point victory over Monaghan. Cathal Carville and former Monaghan coach and Tyrone man Martin McElkennon discuss the performance of both teams, and they also look ahead to Tyrone's All-Ireland semi-final against Kerry. Shane Elliott's also here to discuss Derry's loss to Offaly and Tyrone's defeat at the hands of Mayo. So I'd like to welcome Cathal Carville to the show, regular contributor, Gaelic Life columnist. Cathal, obviously I want you to chat about the Ulster final, Tyrone's big 1-point victory against Monaghan. It was a cracking final, you know. The first half was cagey, but the second half was dramatic. What do you think the key moments were that helped Tyrone win?
Well, it was funny, Potts Ballon said that he would be swiping right for Ulster football, which is quite a change from the puke football analogy back in the noughties, but I think, and to be fair to Pot, there's not many other options out there when you look at the provincial championships in terms of who you'd be swiping right for. But leaving that aside for one moment, I think the key point, and they talk about clutch moments in basketball and in different sports, I think it was close to the end of normal time when the ball was played into McManus, and Hampsey was all over him and got the hand in and dispossessed him. I think it was maybe 62nd or 72nd or 73rd minute, and I think that was the key play of the game, because McManus, had he got onto that ball, there was men coming off the shoulder. Tyrone managed to win possession after that, and then did what Tyrone do, managed the game out very well. So in terms of clutch moment of the game, I think that was it. And personally, I thought Hampsey was by far and away the best player in the park yesterday. I know Matty Donnelly got the Man of the Match award, but not only for his nullifying of McManus, but also that score he took in the first half, you know, outside of the right foot, and it was just an absolute peach. And where the camera angle was right behind it, I think it looked even better. So I think he was one of the key men, obviously captain, leader, and has been for a long time in Tyrone. So that was, I suppose, the clutch moment. In terms of the general play and the key aspects of it, it was interesting that Monaghan had almost as many chances as Tyrone in the first half, but some of their key men missed, you know, relatively easy opportunities coming towards the end of the first half. In that second quarter period, McManus missed, McCarthy had a couple of bad wides, and other days where they went over, you know, they would have been going in maybe 2 or 3 points behind, and even at that stage, given what they did in the third quarter after half time, you know, they would have been 2 or 3 up. And I think going in 5 behind was just possibly a bridge too far. So I think that was another key moment. And talking about key men for Tyrone as well, Peter Hart was quiet for most of the game, but in those, you know, that championship moment, I thought when Monaghan were very much on top and had their purple patch, he popped up and contributed into the game a lot more, and I think that's turned the tide back in Tyrone's favour going into that fourth quarter. So those for me were some of the key moments of what was an intriguing game. I think came to life in the second half, and was by far and away the best provincial final we've had this year.
One of the performances, there's a lot of outstanding performances, I suppose, from Tyrone, but one of the outstanding performances was Rory Beggan, the way he was playing the game. You know, it almost felt unfair that they lost that game because the way he played, the dispossession of Matty Donnelly. Even though he did kick balls out and he actually missed one from play, and you know, but he was still seemed to be everywhere. And him and, you know, Niall Morgan were both all over the place. You know, so was there any other outstanding performances, or what did you think of Beggan's performance?
Well, it was interesting. I am 100% not a fan of this fly goalie position. I understand it on the kickouts, and to be fair to Morgan, he played that very well and put a lot of pressure on Beggan in the first half in terms of him pushing up and, you know, forcing Beggan to make some mistakes. And I just don't understand why inter-county teams don't push up all the time and put the pressure on. We've seen Dublin do it. Where you give away the kick out, it automatically puts the pressure back on you. Where you press up and make that mistake. We saw it in the minor final in Kerry and Derry, where at the end of the game the Kerry guys pressed the Derry defender and the keeper, and they made a mistake which resulted in the goal. Thankfully for Derry, they went straight back down the field and scored the penalty. But I think that pressurising of the kick out, if you want to beat the likes of Kerry or Dublin or even Mayo, you have to do that. It's, you know, a prerequisite. In terms of Beggin's performance, yes, he did kick one wide, and he did play, actually. I think you see him more because obviously he's white jersey and you're thinking, why is he in the position he's in? And actually against Galway in the playoff match, and I've never seen this before, he actually fouled the opposing Galway keeper in the box when a high ball went in. So he is known for, we would call it in our club, taking head staggers at occasion, but I think he got away with it, and he did play very well. The Matty Donnelly position, personally watching the match, McKenna's flick was very, very smart in terms of letting Matty away, and I was actually praying that he was going to stick it in the top corner and say, Begin, get back in net, you're playing number one for a reason. But it was amazing the way he did dispossess him, and I think, to be fair, Matty had too many options. He had McShane on his left, he had McCurry on his right, and you know, he fumbled his kick pass, but take nothing away from Begin. It was a really special moment at a clutch time in the game, and poor old Monaghan, they just have had absolutely no luck in the past while, and they're under 20s going to extra time against Down and coming up short. And again, you know, as a neighbouring county of my own, it's heartbreaking for them. But in sport, you just have to, you know, take the good times with the bad. And to be fair to Tyrone, they know how to win, and they knew how to see that game out when McCurry got the point.
Yeah. It felt like they just kept continually made mistakes, you know, a lot of kicking the ball out over the sideline, being easily dispossessed, running around, you know, holes, you know. I wonder, did the occasion get to them, do you think, or was it, or do you have to give more credit to Tyrone for shutting down options? Well,
I suppose there's maybe a bit of both. To be honest with you, in the first half it looked to me like Monaghan didn't believe they could win it. And I think they seem to have a hoodoo over, the Tyrone boys have a hoodoo over this Monaghan team, that when they come up against them in the big games, especially in Croke Park, they just don't seem to have the self-belief. Now, when Banty got them in at half-time, he no doubt read the Red Act, and they came out and they said, you know what, we can win this. But a 5-point deficit was possibly too much of a bridge to gap, especially when they had missed those opportunities. I think at 3 points, and given the momentum that was with Monaghan in that third quarter, they could have potentially have done it. But the Mac attack that I've referred to before, you know, McManus, McCarthy and McCarron, they did have the chances as well when you look at it, and although Hampsey and McNamee and McKernan were very good on them, had good games, and like McKernan went up and scored a point as well, and McNamee was very strong, they still had the chances to, you know, bridge that gap, to maybe be going in, you know, level at half time. But when it was all said and done, I thought Tyrone deserved the victory in the end, played a wee bit smarter and were more efficient in front of the goals, and at the end of the day that was what was the thing that won it for the Tyrone boys.
Yeah. So now they're going on to play Kerry in the All-Ireland semi-final. They beat a couple of good teams already. Like, can they beat Kerry?
No, is the short answer to that. I think it wasn't Brawley talking about All-Irelands are for Kerry and Dublin and everyone else is just participating. Yesterday was the highlight of Tyrone's year for me, and I think Dooher and Logan will be pretty happy with the Ulster title and when looking to build on, but there's no situation that I see Tyrone beating Kerry in the All-Ireland semi-final. I may rue those words, but I think there's going to be a lot of scars from Tralee in terms of what they did to them in the league, and I just really can't see Tyrone, although they have quality players, I think there's an embarrassment of riches in Kerry, and they will sort out their defensive issues that they've shown. And you know, I just can't see a situation where Kerry don't come out on top, whether they, you know, it's a blowout win against Tyrone or whether they eke it out by a couple of points. I just don't see a game plan or, you know, going one-on-one like they had done against Monaghan that results in anything but a Kerry victory.
Yeah, Kerry are further down the road then. Kerry Dublin final, would you say?
I actually think it's going to be Kerry Mayo final, and Kerry are going to turn up and wipe the floor with Mayo, and it'll be another you know, wailing and gnashing of teeth in the west of the country, because I think it'll be like the like England in the Rugby World Cup, where they beat the All Blacks in the semi-final and everyone had them already crowned as world champions, and then the South Africa went out and did a number on them, and I think that's what's going to happen this year. It would be amazing to see Mayo take out Dublin, and people, I suppose, have been talking about the demise of this Dublin team for a while, but when the triumvirate of Fenton, Kilkenny and King Khan, when they don't operate, and I didn't really see much from them yesterday, even though they cruised to a Leinster final victory, I think that Mayo will just have enough to end Dublin's reign, and then will come a cropper in the final. So you heard it here first.
And what about Tyrone though? Do you think they'll defend the title next year?
I suppose you look around and you see, well, who's going to stop them? Donegal are on the wane. Michael Murphy with the injury this year, I just don't see them having the quality to come back. Derry are on the rise, there's no doubt about it, but are they far enough down the Rory Gallagher road to win an Ulster Championship? It remains to be seen. They're not playing at a high enough level. Armagh, 7 years in, you know, I said on this programme previously that if they don't make an Ulster final, you know, Geezer's position's going to be questioned. Now all his old teammates have come out and backed him, so he'll no doubt get another year, and we'll see where Armagh are next year. The draw is going to be very important in terms of who plays who, but I wouldn't be betting against Tyrone putting Ulster titles back to back.
Yeah. Before we go, there was a couple of, well, one Ulster team won in the hurling at the weekend, but the Derry were beaten, so were Tyrone. What do you think that means for Ulster hurling?
I suppose it's not in a great place, let's be honest about it. They talked about, you know, a tiered championship in the football, and if you look at the scores in terms of the results in the tiered hurling system, the average margin of victory was 17 points. To be honest, Offaly should never have been in the Christy Ring in the first instance. I think that was an outlier in relation to where they had dropped off, and there was issues within the county, etc. And I think Fennelly's got the best players back out for them. You know, Derry put in a spirited performance, but when you're conceding 41 points, you're just not at that level. So it was, I suppose, it was a good season in the round for Derry. They have got some of their best players out. There's still a few of their best players that are kicking the big ball, and to see maybe seeing them out in Croke Park, it might have been a closer affair. But I think Derry will come back and probably win that next year. But I think Offaly were a step too far for them. And then in relation to Mayo and Tyrone, having watched the Tyrone Donegal game, I think Tyrone were very lucky to even be in the final. A couple of freak instances against Donegal, but I think maybe the occasion was slightly too much for them in Croke Park, and in fairness, there was a very well drilled Mayo team that have been there before, and you know, I've played against a lot of them guys myself, and you know, they have some good players, and you know, they were just too much for them on the day. Whereas Ulster hurling, you know, we were eulogising about Antrim at the start of the year, and you know, Donal Óg was getting a lot of stick from the Antrim brigade, but ultimately he's probably proved right against Laois. You know, they just weren't good enough. So I think we will go away and reassess things, but it's going to come down to participation. We need more clubs. We need more players playing with the hurl, and in our club, it's, you know, it's a mad hurling club, but there are very few around, and it's very vast in Ulster, I think, towards football. We could maybe look to force clubs into amalgamations, or creating hurling clubs and providing that option to young people. But I think we've talked about this for a while. We talked about options about Team Ulster, etc., but there needs to be something done, because albeit we have some good days, like against Antrim when they beat Clare or drew with Wexford, you know, there's not enough of them, and there's not a good enough spread of them. And bringing back the Ulster Championship is an option. Everything needs to be put on the table, because what we're doing now isn't working, and in fact we're in reverse gear in terms of hurling in Ulster. Okay,
so in conclusion, Ulster hurling's in a bit of bother, but Ulster football's in rude health. However, Tyrone are going to win next year.
Yeah, well, I think we'll maybe swipe left for Ulster hurling and swipe right for football at the present minute, so we'll see.
Very good. Cal, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Ron.
I'd like to welcome Martin McElkennon to the show. Martin's Tyrone man, but also a former coach of Monaghan with Seamus McEnany. So he's well placed to make a call on Tyrone's victory, but also what Monaghan learned. So welcome to the show, Martin. Just to start, what did you take from Tyrone's performance? How big a win was that for the county?
Yeah, I think it was important for Tyrone to win this Ulster Championship this year. It's been a brilliant Ulster Championship. But to come out on top 16-15 in Croke Park under new management of Fergal Logan and Brian Dewar, two players that have served them very well over the last number of years. I think it'll give the setup, a new setup, a great lift, and it'll definitely help them going forward, both long term and for the next game. I think as well with losing 4 players very, very close to the game with COVID. Definitely put them under a bit more pressure, and again it showed you the depth that Tyrone have on the bench, that they can still make changes and come out on top. I think losing Frank Burns and McElkennon, Brendan, players like that, Donnelly, all good players, definitely would have put them on the back foot, and not having Logan there himself. So I think it's been brilliant for Tyrone to win this Ulster Championship with those circumstances.
Martin, what was the most pleasing elements of how Tyrone played?
Yeah, the most pleasing thing about Tyrone's performance was, I suppose it was a tight game and they came out on top, and they'd be delighted about that going into a potential game against Kerry. As well as that, they didn't concede any goals. I think they've only conceded 1 goal in the last maybe 3 games, which is a big turnaround from where they were against Kerry. A couple of months back when they conceded 5 in the first half. 3 before the water break. So they've obviously tightened things up at the back, and I think you can see that they're not just maybe as bombing forward as they were maybe earlier on in the National League. So I think they've tried to sort of work between the two, where getting the defensive side right, and at the same time on Saturday there you could see the likes of Matty Donnelly and young McCrory up front, with the young lad from Gaelic Life Bradley playing in front of them. So you could actually see that they've maybe changed a wee bit in their style. As well as that, a lot of their key players I think are beginning to play well just at the right time. Kieran McGarry's been exceptional all year. I thought Hampsey was brilliant on Conor McManus, who's been one of the top forwards in Ireland over the last 7 or 8 years. I think he held him to a point. Matty Donnelly was superb, backed as well as he's played. And on top of that, one of the most pleasing things would be for Tyrone that they were able to get McShane onto the pitch, get him game time. He's had a horrible 1.5 years. And Derek Cavan, to get him back, after the injury he had in the semi-final against Kerry, where it looked like potentially maybe a season was nearly over. So he's back, and I had the pleasure of working with Dar for a few years, and brilliant player, great attitude. And I think he can give Tyrone something that maybe they don't have. He's just, a really, really talented player. So there's a lot of pleasing things that will suit Tyrone to get them up to the next level, and to come out of a tight game. I think it'll really stand them.
Martin, what did you think of Monaghan's performance overall?
Look, Monaghan will be disappointed after the weekend. They've put in a massive amount of work, and to come up short by a point again in another Ulster title, it'll hurt them. I thought their first half just lacked a wee bit of intensity. I thought they were a wee bit just slow and coming out of the blocks at the start of the game. But the plus side was that in the second half they were brilliant. They played typical Monaghan, never say die. They turned the game completely around, and they were in with a shout with going into the last seconds of the game. So they'll take a lot of pluses out of it. It's been a tough few weeks for Monaghan football. Losing Ogie there a couple of weeks ago, a young lad that I'd worked with a few years ago at Monaghan Minors. He was the captain of the Monaghan Minors that year, and I know what he meant till the setup. I know what he meant till the lads in that area, and I know how tough it was for them to get over that. So I think you have to give Monaghan a lot of credit, and the management and the players. They had a tough 2 weeks, and yet I think they handled themselves brilliantly in every way, and they showed great spirit, and they just came up against a Tyrone team in the end that just got over the line, but there really wasn't much between it.
And finally, Tyrone's next step is the Kerry All-Ireland semi-final. How do you think they'll do against the Kingdom?
Yeah, I think Tyrone can beat Kerry. I think if it becomes a very open game of football, I think Kerry will win. But I think Tyrone will be smart enough to learn from the last day that they played in Killarney in that semi-final. There was 5 goals in the first half and 6 in total, and no game, you wouldn't go to an underage game and see 6 goals go in and a team getting a victory. So I'd imagine if you look at Tyrone, again Donegal, since and against Cavan, they seem to have changed their style a wee bit. I think they're working harder at the pitch. I think they're putting a bit more pressure at the pitch. I think they're set up differently, that they're not just maybe as open at the back. So I think that'll suit them. I think they'll have learned a lot from that. I'd imagine that after the Kerry beating that they took 2 months ago, that they probably sat down on the Monday, Tuesday night and probably had a lot of soul searching to do. I'm sure the management would have pointed that out. And asked a lot of questions of the players, and I'm sure that's still ringing in their head. So I'd imagine they've learned a lot from that, and possibly more than Kerry has learned. I don't think it'll be the same game or anywhere near it at all. I don't expect the Sean O'Shea's and the Cliffords and these guys to get the same space as they did the last day. So I think it's suiting Tyrone the way they're going in. They've had a couple of really, really tough games. Again Donegal, and against at the weekend there again Monaghan, and that a game like that, you can do any amount of training and it doesn't pay off the same way. So I think Kerry hasn't had that advantage, and there's no Super 8s around like that. There's nobody having to play more games to get up to game time around like that. So I think it's set up for Tyrone. If they can reproduce what they've learnt and reproduce how they've set themselves up over the last few times. But certainly if they go back to the way they played in the Killarney game, shipping 5 or 6 goals early on, I think they'll be in real bother. So, I think Tyrone has a real good chance coming into this game, and it wouldn't surprise me if they pull it off.
Martin, thanks very much for joining the show. So I'd like to welcome Shane Elliott to the show. I wanted Shane to come on to talk about the weekend's hurling action. Shane, just to start, Derry were well beaten by Offaly. I wonder what you thought went wrong and what Derry can learn from that performance.
I don't think I would be starting from a point of what went wrong for Derry, Roland. I think the bottom line is they came up against a superior team. They came up against an Offaly side that are going places under McElkennon. I think there's a rejuvenation happening in Offaly. They have been embarrassed by where they find themselves in as a proud hurling county. So they've been really looking, there's serious investment going on there. They've brought McElkennon in, and Offaly are a team who will go into the Joe McDonagh with serious aspirations to win that at that level, and will give many of the teams there big problems there next year. So from a Derry perspective, they'll not overanalyse it. I think the bottom line was sometimes you have to tip your hat and you have to accept that you were beaten by a better team, and you take the learnings from that. And the learnings, I think, for Dominic and Cormac, who are in charge, would be that, with Offaly off the stage, then I think the Christy Ring is a much more open competition next year. And I think Derry have shown with their performances up to the final that they would be in serious contenders next year. The key for them will be, and I think that's what Dominic and Cormac Donnelly have done well, they've got the best players out, and that sometimes can be a challenge for Derry managers. They've got the best players out, and they've given them a taste of Croke Park, they've given them a taste of potential success, and with Offaly not involved next year, I think they've every chance of going on to potentially win a Christy Ring. But the key from them, the key learning will be that they need to keep the best players on board to make that happen, and not overanalyze what has just happened with Offaly. Offaly would have done that to many teams in the form that they're in, and I think we'll see next year that Offaly are playing at a level that they were always going to above the Christy Ring standard. So all in all, whilst it was a chastening experience for Derry, I think they can come away with some positives in the fact that they reached the final and would look to build on that for next year.
Tyrone were well beaten by Mayo, but can they build on that result?
Can Tyrone build on the result or from their performances this year? Of course they can, absolutely they can. And I think Michael McShane is on record as saying that they're probably ahead of where he felt they would be this year in reaching the Rackard final. So I think he has plenty of positives going from this year. And the bottom line is, a bit like Derry, they came up against a superior team in Mayo. Mayo, following their defeat to Donegal in the Rackard final last year. Clearly they had a sense of purpose this year and were well motivated to overturn that. And will go into Christy Ring and be very competitive next year. Mayo have some very good hurlers. And that proved to be the case. So maybe it's a year or two too soon for Michael and his team to truly make the push for winning the Rackard. But I think he'll go into next year again with plenty of positives. If he retains the players that he has, they hopefully will be hurting from the defeat at the weekend and will feel that, you know, a bit like Mayo last year, they'll be out to prove a point next year and actually get to Croke Park again and be successful this time in the Rackard. But they'll have plenty of challengers there. You know, Armagh will be back again. There will be teams that will certainly put it up to them. Donegal will still be thereabouts. So Ulster will be very competitive in the Rackard next year. In fact, I think Ulster teams will dominate the Rackard next year, and Tyrone will be one of those teams. So Michael will take the hurt from the experience of the weekend, use that as a bit of a motivator and get them cracking again next year. But all in all, I think he's probably happy enough with where they find themselves at the end of his first year, a COVID year where he maybe hasn't the opportunity to work with them to the level they would like. But I think going forward they'll come back next year with plenty of confidence as to where they're at.
Finally, what have you taken from Antrim's performance this year? They had a good start but a disappointing end.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, Ronan, that Antrim's performances this year have been a bit of a mixed bag. You know, you talk about a game of two halves. It really was a year of two halves for Antrim. When you look at the performances in the league were very, very encouraging, you know, and there was plenty of hope for real optimism in terms of the direction that they were going in. You know, their victory over Clare in the first match, their draw against Wexford, their performances against Kilkenny, poor enough against Dublin, but you know, they showed signs during the league that they were a team that were really going places. Problem was the wheels fell off a wee bit come championship, and particularly with the heavy defeat to Dublin, which was probably the most disappointing aspect of this year. They put up a better performance against Laois, but ultimately they failed and are knocked back down to McDonagh, which is disappointing. So whilst they retained their Division 1 status in the league, they've been relegated in terms of the championship, so they're now out of the Leinster Championship, which by the way, I just don't agree with. I think any team that's competing in Division 1 should be in the Liam McCarthy. So I don't agree with that structure that the GAA have in place. And whilst I understand why they have it, I think it's something that might need another look at. But going forward, I think the important thing for Antrim is to retain the services of Darren Gleeson. I think Darren has clearly showed that he has got the players on board with him. He has got them playing for him. I think the challenge they have is to try and move up the gears from league to championship, and that's what the top teams do extremely well. But Antrim have to come into the league and be in peak form from the off. You know, as we saw against Clare, they were flying against Clare and beat Clare. But as you saw as the championship went on, Clare were a really, really good side who improved significantly from their league form to championship form. So the challenge for Darren will be finding how do you do that in Antrim, because we haven't got the strength and depth that the top teams have, that we can try things out in the league and we can experiment, because it's important for us to retain our league status. And to do that, we have to be at it from the get-go. We have to be at it from day one. The first game, Antrim have to be flying, whereas the other teams can transition themselves and build up to peak come championship time. So I think that's a challenge for Darren, if he hopefully stays, and the management team, to work out how they can better manage that, because that didn't work this year. We didn't make the step up in the way that we would have liked come championship, but I think that might have been through they've had burst themselves through the league. They had exhausted themselves through the league, and then maybe were running a wee bit on empty when it came to the summertime, when it came to championship time. And Dublin blew them out of the park. Now, we saw that Dublin were a good side. They went on to beat Galway, but I think Cork showed their deficiencies as well. But I suppose mixed bag, plenty to be positive about in terms of Antrim. We can look forward to League 1, Division 1 hurling next year. So all in all, it could be worse, and I think another good stab at the Joe McDonagh is maybe not a bad thing in terms of where they're at in their development. So, in terms of the year, I'd be more positive than negative about the year overall, and I think, as I say, we've top tier hurling to look forward to next year.
Okay, thanks very much, Shane. Thanks for watching this week's show. We'll see you next time.